The sikha we will be learning now is look at the sikhas Chilik Chov, Parshas Vayishlach, the third sikha for Parshas Vayishlach. The sikha talks about the posek kotentim kol chasodim. In Chumash we learned this week's parsha that when Yaakov, when he was going away from Lavan, he was returning to Eretz Yisrael, he heard that Esau, his brother, is coming against him with an army, so he got very scared. So he started davening to Hashem, and he said to Hashem, and the pasuk continues, you told me to come back. So I became small from all the kindness and all the truth that you did to your servant, which is himself. And he's asking Hashem, protect me, please, from my brother from Esau. And the Rabbi is going to discuss what does the word kotentim kol chasodim mikol emes mean. I became small, and what's he saying? And the Rebbe will quote soon, not in the beginning, but a little bit later, right away, but further, he will quote from Rashi, the way Rashi learns. And he starts off by quoting the way the Alter Rebbe explains it in Igeres HaKodesh. Igeres HaKodesh is a section of Tanya. It's a collection of letters. So the Siman Beis, the second letter that's written there, is the letter that starts off with the word Kotenti. And the Alter Rebbe wrote this. It says in top, in Tanya, it says in small words that he wrote it Achar Biyose mi Peterburg, after he came back from Peterburg, meaning after he was released from prison. He was put into prison. Yutas Kislev was released, and afterwards he wrote this letter. And there he explains what the words Katentim Mikol Chasodim mean, and he explains as Al but what it means. And then he goes on saying, asking the Chassidim that please, no one should go into a fight with those who put him in jail. It doesn't say these words, but that teichen, etc., etc. So the Rebbe says like this: from posek atentim mikol chasodim mikol v'gemer, on the posek where it says, "I became small from all the kindness, all the truth, etc." Is v'vayder Alter Rebbe zayin ageres hakedesh v'aser geschrieben macher b'yosem in Peterburg. So Alter Rebbe explains in his letter that he wrote after he came back from Peterburg, after he was released from prison. And he teaches like this: what does kontenti mikol chasodim mean? Shebekol chesed v'chesed that the Eibishter tut mit a mention, and any kindness, all kindness that a yid, that the Eibishter does with a yid, with a person, darba in peil zayin as over nashval ruach, has to cause him to become humble. And that's the touch kontenti. Kontenti means I became humble because you did chesed to me. And he continues, while the chesed is kirves of the kimamish, when you get chesed from Hashem and Hashem does kindness to you, that means Hashem gets close to you. And if you have a lot of chasodim, you get very close. Was mer chesed, and the more chesed you get from Hashem, versus mer kamei, so you are closer to Him. Als mer is a bottle, so you're more bottle. You become humble from chesed. There's a lot of chesed, you become more humble till you become kilo, like nothing. I am befes, really, really nothing. You become completely bottle. And the Riber at Yaakov gesagt atentim kol chasodim, and the Alter Rebbe explains that's why Yaakov said, meaning as durchal chasodim, as the Rebbe short mit him getan, that with all the through all the kindness the Rebbe did with him, is Yankov klein geworden in seine eigens. Yankov Kotenti became small in his own eyes. But this is the bittul was kommt mit This is the bittul, the nullification, the self-nullification to Hashem that comes because you get closer to Hashem. And how do you get closer to Hashem? When Hashem does chesed to you, that makes you feel closer, that makes him closer to you. That's the way the Alter Rebbe teaches. Rashi teaches differently, and the Rebbe will quote Rashi in a second. But the Rebbe says, Pirish Rashi ala posik. Rashi on this posik, and let's skip the parentheses, which says what Rashi says, but the Rebbe is saying that Rashi on the posik is pshuta shel mikro. Rashi on the posik explains the pshat of the posik. And therefore, what does Rashi say? So let's go back to the parentheses. Rashi writes that what does katenti mikol chasodim mean? Nismatu zuchiyesai al dei chasodim v'emesh asisimi. That my schuyas, my merits became diminished because of all the kindness and truth that you did with me. Because since you did all kinds of good things to me, every time you did good something to me, it used up some of my schusim. So I became small, which means diminished with my schusim, contained, I became diminished with my schusim because of all the kindness you did to me. That's why I'm afraid that Shema Mishef Tachtani, that maybe after you promised, because the question is, L'chure, the Eibishter promised to protect him. So he's saying, but nevertheless, I'm afraid, because maybe after you promised me, maybe I became dirty through Avera. It'll cause me to be given over in the hands of Esav. That's what Rasha says. So Rasha writes this as Pshuta Shel Mikra, simple pshat, and his masbih for us Yaakov Gebet Natzileinino. He explains why Yaakov had to ask Hashem to protect him, to save him from Esav. Homdik Avtochim Meforeshes. After all, he had a clear promise from Hashem, Mushmarticha in Pashas Vayetze, I will watch you wherever you go. I will be with you. So the answer is, Rasha says, why did he ask David? He was afraid. He was afraid that maybe Taka you promised, but after you promise, maybe I got dirty again with a sin, and now I'm not deserving that you should protect me. That's why he's asking for it. But that's not like the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe is mefarish v'diverta katentim mikol chasodim v'gemer. So the Rasha explains it in Pshuta Shel Mikra Pasha. That's the hemshach of the pasuk. He's davening to Hashem, and he's saying first that why am I davening? Why am I afraid? And I have to ask you specifically to save me because maybe I got dirty with the sin. That's such kotenti. I became small. I lost my schusim, or I diminished my schusim, and I got dirty with sins. But the Alter Rebbe is not writing pshat, push it in the pshat of the pasuk. When he teaches kotenti, vidos is atayre. That's like a lesson, a Torah. Hey, Rob, Avedis Hashem. This is a lesson in the service of Hashem. Shaykh and Geyitziyah. That's shaykh and is important for every single yid. And the Alter Rebbe teaches that means as Gilei Chasodim Shel Mailo, that the revelation of Chasodim from above, that from pale and there's a Zayin Ashvar Ruach, has to cause a person to become humble. That's a kotenti. You become humble, you become small because of the Chasodim, like I said before, because the Chasodim makes a kiruv, a closer to the person, and the more chasodim, the more closer you get, and the closer, more then you get more bottle. And the Rebbe is going to explain here what's the difference between why Rasha says it like this, and the Rebbe hinted to it already, but now he's explaining it more. That Rasha is explaining the pshat, and the Alter Rebbe is not explaining the pshat of the pasuk, but the way it is. And the Rebbe goes on in more detail. Das Rebbe has some chilik oifen zwischen Yankov and Chotenya der Oifen mit der Alter Rebbe schreibt the Geras HaKedesh. This fits to the difference pashat in the situation, the way Yaakov said it, in what situation he was, and the way the Alter Rebbe said it in the Segeres HaKedesh, the way he wrote it in the Segeres HaKedesh. Yaakov hat es gesagt als Tefillah Bakoshe. Yaakov said it as a prayer, as a request. When there is gestanden am Mann im Matzav shel Sakone, but mehr gat verreisen. It was when he was a time, in a situation of danger. He was afraid of Esav. The Rebbe was masbid the Sibbe was ein Pachat und Bakoshe. That's why the Rashi explains the simple pshat that he's answering this question. He explains what is the reason why he's afraid and he has to request Eibusher should protect him. Because kotenti, which means in simple pshat, because maybe I don't have the schusim, maybe I sinned, etc., etc. The Alter Rebbe wrote this letter after he came from Peterburg. Das heißt, when there's arus v'sakona, that means when he already left the danger. So you can't touch in the Alter Rebbe situation, like Rasha says, that this is a request to be protected from the danger. He was out of the danger already. When the Geras is and this letter was written together with thanking Hashem, it was it was a lesson and a warning to the Chassidim. And this is what he writes in the letter further. That's why I'm notifying a great notification for all Chassidim. For the great many kindness Hashem did in such a way, a big way. And he says, therefore, don't pick up your heart, don't fight against the others. In such a situation, is masim de pirish b'chol chesed v'chesed HaKadosh Baruch Hu yiseh lo adam tzarich liyashav l'ruach meid. In this situation, you can't say it as Yaakov said it, that this is a reason why he's afraid. So by the Alter Rebbe, it was not why he's afraid, but this is telling the Chassidim that I got Chasodim, a mele that should bring you to Bittul, but brings you to Bittul, you will not answer those people who are against us. You will not answer, you will not get involved, because you have to be your bottle. And because Hashem did all its Chasodim, it makes more Bittul. If it makes more Bittul, to mele you will not do anything to the opponents, etc., etc. So it fits the way Rasha explains in Pshuta Shel Mikra with the Alter Rebbe says. What we have to understand, you look a little bit deeper. And the Rebbe is going to ask a kasha sai and Rasha Pshat inside the Alter Rebbe situation. He's going to ask a kasha that in simple, it's clear. But if you look deeper, even in the Pshuta Shel Mikra, you look deeper a little bit, pnimius, we have a problem. What's the problem? How is it possible that Yankov should be afraid that maybe he got dirty with a sin? Maybe he sinned. And how is the shaykh such a thing by Yankiv? The other part that he says that I'm afraid that my schusim, my merits are diminished because it did me all kinds of chesed. There's not enough schuyas, merits to be protected. This and that's why he's asking. That makes he's moving. We understand. It's not saying you're afraid of an avere. He's afraid that maybe he used up his chusim. The Gemara says Shabbos and Tainis that if Deibishter does a miracle to somebody, yes, they take away some of his chusim. So that's shaykh. So he said, I'm afraid my chusim were taken away. That's only a reason why he's afraid that he will lose, he lost, or Hashem will take away some of his chusim. But this is not enough that to say that it's like he didn't avere, and that's why the Eibishter is going to change change his promise, and that's why he's asking. How could you think that's all? Yaakov would not shaykhs to avere. Shaykhs could lose chusim because he used the mab, but to say that he was afraid that he was dirty through an avere, Yaakov Avinu, that's not shaykh. The same way you have to understand by the Alter Rebbe. From them, the Alter Rebbe brings the Rageres HaKedesh Gufe. In the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe is going to show that even though the Alter Rebbe says a different pshat, but he does also accept and connect it to the simple pshat of Rashi in Chumash concerning Yankiv. Because since the Alter Rebbe brings in the Rageres HaKedesh Gufe, in that same letter, he brings nit nor bezui gedos gamkim adosh shel Yankiv. He doesn't just finish off, this is the mid of Yankiv, which means the mid of Yankiv was bittul. He also brings what the psukim say further, and this is what the Alter Rebbe writes. And that's why he said, concerning why he explained, excused himself, why he's afraid of Esav. And it's not enough that he was promised by Hashem to be protected. Hashem said, I'm with you. Why? Since Yankiv was small in his own eyes, because of the great chasodim, like he continues, he said, with my stick I crossed, which one of the pshatim is, I had nothing, and nevertheless now you did me all kinds of kindness, so Hashem did kindness, and therefore so he said, I'm not deserving and worthy of being saved. With the Maimer Azal, like the Chazal say, there's all the Lashon of Tanya. It says, we're afraid always maybe the sin will cause that you should lose the protection, because he thought maybe he sinned. And the Alter Rebbe brings this behemshech to his. He says first the pshat is contained means you become small in your eyes bottle. And then he says that's why Yaakov became small in his eyes. He thought he'd sinned, etc., etc. So he's mashmer from the fact that the Alter Rebbe brings also the simple pshat and posik. Number one, as the pirish from the Alter Rebbe is contained, the bittel was kum tzadrip chasod with the Alter Rebbe's pshat. That what does contain to mean? That you get the bittel because of many chasodim. It's at kibbutz Hashem. If you get chasodim, get close to Hashem, mainly your bittel is verbunden mit dem pirish haposhe. That must be connected with the simple pshat. Ados mein di meide von Yankiv val nit mit beinem shechoter. That it means why it explains why Yankiv was afraid, thinking that he sinned. So we see the Alter Rebbe also writing the letter that he wrote, even though with another pshat fit to his situation, he also brought in the simple pshat concerning Yankiv, and he connects it. And number two, Azeich Deringen is negated to Matzev that Alter Rebbe is going to in Peterburg. And it seems like this fits to the Alter Rebbe after he came from Peterburg, after he came from jail. So the question will be, and before the Rebbe asked the question, so the Rebbe says, via Shleimar, you could say, Ademit meinterech zum Ramazain, that when the Alter Rebbe brought from the way it was by Yankiv, and the Rebbe says it shows that it's connected, when it's negated to his Matzev, you could say that what he meant to hint here, how is he connected the same way by Yankiv? As nicht gucken der Ruf ist noch sein dicken Twisse hat gehad die Aftoche von Hashem to Magid, as wird befragt werden, that in spite of the fact that while he was in jail, Baal Shem Tov and the Magid came to him, and they told him, they promised him that he will be free. Und wird noch keine weitere Regale sein Chassidus, so wie says be free, and he will be able to continue spreading Chassidus even more than before. So he had a promise. So we have the same problem. If he had the promise, why was the Alter Rebbe writing this? Because to tell us that even though he had a promise, even though he was freed, he's still asking the Eibishter for whatever he's asking here. So it comes out from here that he connects what happened to Yaakov, and the way Yaakov meant, what Yaakov meant with Kotenti, he's also connecting it to his situation. So it comes out that he's also trying to hint that he's afraid that the promise of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid that he'll be freed might not come true. And it's negated to after Peterborough because he wrote this letter after he was out of jail. Must be some connection to that too. That maybe something will be because he didn't have it. He's not moved, he's not understood. How could the people at the Alter Rebbe such a level of katanti thinking that he didn't have it? So the kasha and Yaakov, how could it be? And since the Alter Rebbe connected it to his situation, it's a negate the Alter Rebbe also. How could you say that? Now, Bechlolas, it does, but in general, the Rebbe says you could explain it like this. When a person goes up to a higher level spiritually, is a Zachbas in a niedrigere Darge, is das nicht gewinnt ein Chet, wird es verrechnet ein Chet in a hechere Darge. Sometimes you do something that in the level you are, it's not considered a sin, not wrong. When you reach a higher level, this is considered a sin. Now, simple pshat, you would think it means that something that you did before in your lower level was not a sin. If you do the same thing now because you're on a higher level, it's called a sin. But the Rebbe says it's not the pshat only. When the pshat in them is, the pshat is nicht nur wird it's von das Neiton dieselbe Meise wird es ein Achet. It doesn't mean only that if you will now do the same thing you did before, because you're in a higher madrege, it will be considered a sin. Plus, it's not a chiddush, that's such a big chiddush. We understand certain things in your lower level, it's not bad, and if you're in a higher level, it's not so good. But that's not the only pshat. Nor the friedik is shein opgeton in the Meise. What it means is that what you did before, it's already done. Was b'shas asiyos is nicht achet. While you did it, wasn't a sin. The male zishayach by Yankiv and the Alter Rebbe. The male that answer that what he did before is not considered a chet. It can be a chet. He's meaning itzter madrigos elyon. So now, when he reached a higher level, dan ifir. Now you're judging him what he did before. When the darf ifir tshuva, then you have to do tshuva for it. It goes from Tanya that, in other words, this could answer the kasha that hitaka doesn't mean he didn't have it, but he's going now to a higher level. The male, when you go to a higher level, what you did before maybe was not so you didn't have a chet, but now it's considered a chet, and that's what he meant. Nischalachti bechet. Say Yankov inside the Alter Rebbe when he connected himself to this union too. What does he mean that maybe I got dirty with an aveda? It doesn't mean I did an aveda before. I did something that my drege that I'm reached now, that is considered an aveda, and that you could say. But the Rebbe said the Rebbe mas, but it's not enough because emestaka b'shas ma'ases it's kan chet nigiven. Even though we're talking now something that you did. That at the moment you did it, it was not considered an avera. Afal became, and still is balayosik echet yachoshem. But when you go higher madrege, that same act that you did before is considered now for the before an avera. So it's not. So taka wasn't a sin now. When you did it, wasn't a sin. But the probably was something not so simple. What you did before was completely good. Everything was the best. You can't do tshuva later for it. Must be it is something that's not so, it's not a ched, not an aveda, but it's still something. He brings a lotion to Gduke mitzvahs from Arizal. That it's something that's, we can't blame you didn't do anything wrong, but there's something not smooth. So later on, it's considered a chet. But that is not shaykh when they to Yankov Avinu. Not only did he not do any avedas, and Dal Rebbe also, but he didn't even do anything that's not smooth. So what does it mean? Leib die Scheile, wie Scheich as I sagen, but it's Yankiv and no, but it's Alter Rebbe. How could he say something like this? Yankiv, he was afraid he sinned, and the same thing when he Alter Rebbe. So Rebbe explains it like this: the Ponim Yofes is mefarish the meaning from Ketentim Kol HaChason. The Ponim Yofes explains the posik. I'll see this, and he says like this: what does the posik Ketentim Kol HaChason mean? The way the Ponim Yofes says. But the aliyas neshamas from neil and hacher neil, when the neshamas go up from one level to another level, and they do go up. For tzaddikim eilem unucha, Gemara says tzaddikim don't have any rest, and it says they always go mechayil l'choil. Shneimar yelchu mechayil l'choil. They go from strength to strength. So they go from one level to the other. Is eidet zayin eilam dem hacher neilam. So before they go to a higher world, zayin is a chayzerim lekatnus. They get smaller. In other words, they go down a level. And but this is was Yisretzich in the Ragdoma Tzichin Kotten in Tanya. There's a before Yeshar Yichud V'Munah, there's a section called Chinuch Hagdoma Tzichin Kotten. Wegen the meaning of Sheva Yipul Tzadik come there he calls this posik Sheva Yipul Tzadik come. Tzadik could fall 7 times and he goes up. That means before you go up to a higher level, you have to go down. The way the Ponim Yofes says it, this is the Loshen. Zwischen Gadlus Rishon and Gadlus Sheni is Dokatna Sheni. Between the first level you are godless, you're in a high spiritual level. And then you're going to Gadlus Sheni, to a second level, which is a greater level than before. There has to be a middle katnas. He calls it katnas Sheni. There's a katnas. There's a level that you go down. This is the Pirish Apostle Kotenti. This is what he teaches means. The Apostle Kotenti, I became small by the Elias was Yankiv, but Eilig went from Chutzlor to Eretz Yisrael. This is a time when Yankiv was going up from Chutzlor outside of Eretz Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, which is a spiritual great elevation. His father Aliyah given by him Kotenti. Before he came up, came Kotenti. He had to go right. Let me explain it. What it means is that after, when you're going from one level to another, so in middle, you have to go lower, as it seems like from Chinuch Kotten, that you have to go down even lower than the level you were before. But you're constantly going up. So in the order 15, the Rebbe brings from Pelach Harimen, in Pelach Harimen he says like this, gives a moshel. Somebody is thinking a great seichel, a lot of deep in yonim. And then he has a kasha, and through the kasha that he has, and the thing that's, he gets mavulvul, he gets mixed up, and because of that kasha, now he goes up much higher level. So the middle point is something, a level that's lower than the previous one. Now, be'emes is constantly part of going up. It's part of going up. Because even though in the middle, at Begilui, the way it feels that he's, before he thought he understood it, and he understood it very deep. And now it's all mixed up, and now he doesn't understand it. So he's less than before. But because of that, he goes up to higher madrege. That's a mashal given that when you go from one level to another, from godless rishon, we call it the godless sheni, there has to be the katness in the middle, and the katness will help you go up. We find that the Gemara says Reb Zeira fasted 40 days or 100 days, different girsas in Gemara. So before he went to learn Talmud in Talmud Yerushalmi, he was going up from Talmud Bavli to Talmud Yerushalmi. So it had to be in the middle level. It says that he wanted to forget Talmud Bavli. What does it mean? Talmud Bavli, if he would just have it the way it is, would mix him up from Talmud Yerushalmi. So he had to have he had problems with Talmud Bavli, so to speak. And then because of that, he was able to go to Yerushalmi. So the Peil Mamish, this is part of the Aliyah. Part of going up, because that's the only way you go to the higher Madrege. But at this point, it's katnis. It's the middle. And that's what happened. The Ponim Yofa says that between being a chutzlor, which was one level, now going to Eretz Yisrael, in middle, there had to be a katnis, lower even than before, kedei to be able to step up and go to the higher. But it says, Yuvan was Yaakov gebeten, and this explains why Yaakov asked, so please, Eibush, to save me from, protect me, save me from my brother from Esav. What does it mean? The Baal does not the Raftocher. Since after Hashem had promised him originally, when ich know the Friedrich Elias, and after all the previous elevation of his Madrege, by him given from Katenti, now that he's going to a higher level, so now he has Katenti, which means now he's even lower than before. And now he has to be a special protection. And wie is Mavayr and Ponim Yov, as the Ponim Yov explains, as Chotch Kat and Sheni is Hecher from Gadlus Rishon, even though the middle Darge is higher than the first one, the middle one, the Kotenti, the one that's in the middle, which you're low, is greater than what you were before. Afal Pekain, still, the Baldas is fortan initial katnas, but after all, it's katnas, darfan dan hob mashmirak daily, you have to be very careful. Who knows what could happen to you because it's katnas. And the way the Rebbe explains it in the order, what it means is, it's greater than before because sof kol sof, this is part of the next level, because this brings it to the level. But begilui, the way you look at it, the way it is at that moment, it's katnas. And it's less than before, like in the mashal of the seichel, that the middle darga, when you don't even have the level of understanding that you had before. So it's lower. And when you go lower, you got to be very careful, because lepel mamash, at that moment, it's lower. Sof kosof, as he says, is greater, the middle is greater than what happened before. The katnas in the middle is greater because that's the beginning of the second godless. Ober, on the other hand, lepel mamish, at that moment there is a problem. You are kotenti. You are less even than before. And b'meila, if they're less than before, you need shmira. When you're in a lower level, you have to be more careful. When you're higher level is one thing, but you're low. So the promise they gave him before was in that level. Now that you came a lower level, so now he's afraid. Maybe that promise won't work. This could also explain the connection between the Alter Rebbe's Pshat with Rashi Pshat. The Pirish and Shemnis Alachti Bechet. We asked the Kasha, how could it be that we should even think that Yaakov did an Avera, he was thinking maybe did an Avera. So the Rebbe says that the pshat is, Shem nislachti b'chet, maybe I got dirty with chet. Chet doesn't mean Avera. Chet is meloshen ani u'shleim b'ni chatoim. There's a posting that says that Bathsheba said to David that if he will take over the Malchus, then, and Shleime will not, so then me and Shleime, my son, will be chatoim. Chatoim means sins. Doesn't mean there will be sins. It means cheson, something missing. That's the meaning of the word chet. So here also, asedo cheson, that there's something lacking, which is katnus. In zayin aveda legabe zaymayim and matzav hachodesh. Since you're going to a higher level, and legabe the higher level, you have something lacking, because as we said before, that this katnus is lacking, and here the Rebbe says it's lacking legabe his higher level. In truth is, it seems like it's even lacking legabe his previous level. Not the pale. The pale, it is part of the higher level. But it's not, sof kosof, it's not the higher level. As he's standing now, he's going up to a higher target. That means he's already in the level, that's what I think to explain. The level, he's in the level of being able to get the higher target. And nevertheless, he's not in the higher target. He's lower, even lower than before. Like in the Moshel. He's now going to the higher level of Seichel, but Lepel, Mamash is even less than the previous one. And that's what you mean. So when in the Rebbe, so when Rashi Taish Shem is lachti bechet, maybe I got a chet. That means what happened to me, I have a chet. I'm at the matzab now of Katenti. So the Taish of the Rebbe became bottle, and he's feeling not that he did an Aveire, he's feeling that he's now in the matzav of Katenti, the katnus that's in between. And the katnus is in between is something that maybe the promise won't work. When those guf is verbunden mit the Riba Chasodim, this is connected to the Alter Rebbe Taiches. He Taiches the Katenti means that because you did a lot of chesed, you become bottle. So this is connected to it. The Rebbe Chasodim of the Rebbe Shira Geton mit Yankiv, the great many Chasodim Rebbe Shira mit Yankiv, was by him Aruz Gerufen nicht nur as Nismate Zochies. It brought out with him not only he feels that he doesn't have enough schuyas, nor as ein Avedes Hashem Gufi eats the beginnes katnus for Chasodim. His Aveda now is katnus. His Aveda now is in the level of Chasodim that's missing. And the reason is since now the Eibush there's so much chesodim. So the Alter Rebbe says that means he got closer to him. If he got closer to him, that means he has more bittul. If he has more bittul, it means he's already in shaychel to the higher level. If he's shaychel to the higher level, so really his Avedas Hashem should be more than Milifni, more than before. But Lepel it's not. At the moment of Katenti, and eventually we will see that it's part of the higher level. But the moment of Katenti, it's not like the higher level. And he's already going to the higher level. So therefore, that's what he said. That's a bad matzav. When Leib sein Aveda is nit azeh, is reading in the field of a katnus. That's why he felt low. So he's katnus. So the two pshotim fit. He was afraid in salachti bechet, which chet means that he is missing something, is missing in the Avodas Hashem. And the reason why he's missing, because like the Alter Rebbe says, now that you reach the higher Madrege, Hashem did you so much chasodim, so you reach the higher Madrege, so you are shayches to the higher Madrege, but Lepel Mamish, you're still in the katnus. Later we will see how that katnus is connected to the godless, but now you don't see it. B'meila, therefore, he felt that he's missing something. And B'meila daftocha, the promise of Hashem, maybe it will not work. The same way we'll understand concerning the Alter Rebbe. So you do it's known that this concept of spreading the fountains of Chassidus outside through the Alter Rebbe mainly started after he came from Petersburg, which means after he was freed from prison. After he was in prison, then he started in a higher level spreading Chassidus. But das beweist godless, this shows what kind of high level he reached, and we call that the higher level, we call it godless, like the Ponim Yofis calls it. So it shows on the great aliyah, the great godless the Alter Rebbe reached noch after Petersburg, in Vergleich with the godless from Petersburg, in comparing it to the way it was before Petersburg, before the jail. So this is a much higher level. Is vision the godless shekeden Petersburg. So in between the godless at the high level he was before he was in jail, and in greatness, which is higher than the greatness of before that came later, is by him given the for Katenti. So in the middle there was Katenti, there Maisif and Alter Rebbe. There was the jail, and the jail is Katenti. What does that mean? And as we said before, Katenti means the katness, that you're not yet you're getting close to the higher level, but you're reaching to the high level, but you're not there. But as we said before, you're even lower than you were before. And then I've explained how it is. The Meister hat doch mit sich gebracht, viele Grace Yisurim. The being imprisoned brought many and a big pain, big suffering. Okay, you do it's known what the Barditchever Gimon beim Alter Rebbe and gave an arrest. We know what the Barditchever said to the Alter Rebbe concerning his imprisonment. Why did you take so much suffering on your shoulders? So much suffering of Klal Yisrael. Yisurim Shalmayla, the suffering of above. Ayere Yisura Nefesh Yisura Guf, your Yisurim, suffering of your Nefesh and suffering of your body. You can't do it with Makifim. We could have done it through Makifim, which means through spiritual things. He could have got rid of it. Which doesn't, he's not going in what Alter Rebbe answered him. But the Lepel, we see from the words of the Barditchever that he testified that the Alter Rebbe went through many, many Yisurim. But those like gesagt, the Barditchever, the Yisurim from the Meiser Gufe. That the Barditchever said concerning the pain that he had, the suffering he had in being imprisoned. Well, but there's more to it. After that, he had great suffering 3 hours after he was already released from prison. The Alter Rebbe said it's an even greater suffering than before. We know the story that the Alter Rebbe was brought to the wrong place. Brought to the house after he was freed from prison. They brought him to a house that on the bottom of the house, the top house lived a chossid. That's where they were supposed to bring him. They brought him to the bottom, which was a misnagid, and the chassidim were waiting. They didn't know where he was. Till finally, after 3 hours, they realized maybe there was a mistake. They came there, they saw, yes, and that's when they took the Alter Rebbe out. And the Alter Rebbe said that what he did to him those 3 hours, it's more suffering than he had the whole time. So the imprisonment and the time right when he came out is great Yisurim. He's verstandig, so from that we understand, if he had Yisurim, as Begilui, das gewähren Katniss in the Fila gab the Friedrich, man trägt es Gadlus von Alter Rebbe. So it was a Katniss, a lower Madrege, not only Lagaba what happened afterwards, a lower Madrege, even Lagaba what happened before. Because he had Yisurim, and before that he didn't. And as the Rebbe will say, if he had, the way he was in jail, he couldn't do his Avetas Hashem properly. And we sehen von der Reit von der Rebbe Mashab nicht mehr sagen. We see the words from the Rebbe Rashab. As Gott ist schwer zu sagen, the Rebbe Rashab said like this. And even though she's schwer zu sagen, the Rebbe said, what I'm going to say, it's hard to say. That's what the Rebbe Rashab said. Von deswegen, still, is doch das after, but I'm going to say it anyway. The Gili was the Peterburg, the great revelation that came after Peterburg, which means after Alter Rebbe went out of jail, it was geworden. Why did it come so great? Because it's al derech maimer azal, like the Chachamim tell us, hazayis keshkeichnei say meitze shamnei, that an olive, when you squeeze it, that's when it gives out its oil. So how does it give out the oil, which is something special? You have to squeeze it first. Same about Alter Rebbe, when you were squeezed with the Yisurim in jail, that's why afterwards he came out in such a high gilui. So the Rebbe says, from the moshel, he's moving from the moshel that the Rebbe Rashab gave on the Alter Rebbe being in jail and going out. So this moshel tells us that in jail, he was in a katnas, in the lower madrega, not only Lagabe what happened later, the level he had later, even Lagabe the level before. Why? Because you see that in the moshel. What's in the moshel? Basically, zayis, when you squeeze an olive, then the zayis liegt unter the press, when the olive is under the press. It doesn't have either one of the two qualities. It doesn't have the later quality. He didn't give out the oil yet. The oil could light up. It could light up the whole world. But that is not out yet. So that level of quality is not there. But they're going to pay it. And he doesn't have the quality before when it was a fruit. Even though before they squeezed it, they couldn't use the oil. Is there a chaber given a pre-Michael? It was a fruit to eat. In der Zeit, when you squeeze the olive, it does lose that mile. When it's being squeezed, it doesn't have the mile later of having the oil, and it doesn't have the mile of being a fruit. It's in between. It's even lower than what was before. The selbe is moving the same thing as the Alter Rebbe when he was in jail in Peterburg. And nicht nur is noch dem, when he given the Afotzes, noch Peterburg. Not only was not the Afotzes spread the Chassidus in such a high level the way it was after Peterburg, he couldn't even do it the way he did it before. He was in jail. Before he also spread Chassidus in a great Giluyim. And when he was in jail, he didn't have that either. So we see it as a level, the Moshe tells a level of katness. Und der Linie, was in jener Zeit ist nie gewähnt, die Afshoret zu Mepis nach Chassidus. The Rebbe says here, this that he couldn't spread Chassidus while he was in jail, it's not only you would think it's something to get to other people. People couldn't hear chassidus from him, couldn't get chassidus from him, but it didn't affect him. So he says not. It wasn't the gay to the Alter Rebbe himself. Moving from Indian Avram, when like we find by it's understood from what we find by Avram, that when he couldn't do achnasa sorchim, he couldn't have guests. So not only that there were no people that he could help, it bothered him. He felt bad. So the fact that Alter Rebbe was in jail and couldn't spread chassidus, he felt bad. And this is even by the Alter Rebbe, it's even more than by Avram Avinu. By Avram Avinu, it's talking about doing Gemilas Chasodim Begashmi, giving to it. Ularvim, giving it to Arabs. Unkeda Matenteira, it's over for Matenteira. Alachas Kama Vakama, certainly for the Sretzich Lacha Matenteira, certainly when it's talking after Matenteira. And to Eden, we're talking about giving Teira Chassidus to Eden. And wegen Talmud Teira, we're talking about Teira. The college can Talmud Teira the Rabbi. Certainly that spreading, teaching Torah in public. Certainly Pnimis HaTorah. So he felt very, very low, Katenti. Und der Pfarr hat geschrieben Katenti. That's why he wrote Katenti. Because Katenti is the union of katnus, and everything fits. The kasha was, how could you say B'negei Alter Rebbe and B'negei Yaakov Avinu that maybe they did an Aveira? It's not that they didn't Aveira. Maybe there was a chet, a cheson, and not maybe there was a cheson. The cheson was of katnus because it's a level of katnus. Now it ended up that this is part of the second godless, but b'shas ma'aseh there was a katnus, and the katnus was decided by Yaakov. There was a katnus because he was not yet at a higher level. And B'meile, there was in the middle, like the Moshel of the Seichel. I don't know exactly in which prat it was, but it was like that. But the Alter Rebbe also, that it was a katnus. And that's why the Alter Rebbe wrote in the letter, Sahis Biur, that it's because that you become bottle. And that's why, but that bittel that you have is connected to the Indian that since you have bittel and you're higher level, you should already be in the higher level, but you can't be. But sof you're missing the lower level. And that's why you need a special shmira that David should protect specially, even though he promised, but because of the chesron, you're afraid you're not royal to it at that point. And when you're in jail, or Yaakov, when he had the problem with Esav, at that time he was afraid that wouldn't be. That's why he had to daven. And the Alter Rebbe also brought in this to explain that what happened here when he was in Petersburg, there was this kotenti, this katnus, which is similar by Yanka, the union of katnus sheni, as the Ponyofik calls it. Every year, everything that was once repeats itself again. And everything starts from Torah. That's what we read in the Torah. Shabbos close to Yutas Kislev, other Yutas Kislev, Atzme, or on Yutas Kislev itself. Kotainti Mekol HaChasodim. You read Kotainti Mekol HaChasodim. Why? Because this is for everybody. This is what Yutas Kislev is, as we have explained, and it's negated to everybody. But this is the Yankov Avinu's request. And for Nisi Yisrael, for all Rebbe's later, for all Nisiim. Yes, Veggebracht and Keles Yankiv. It says in Keles Yankiv, as Nosi is a Rosh Tevis Nitzutze Shel Yankiv Avinu. The word Nosi, which goes on all the Nisiim of all generation, is a Rosh Tevis. Again, the abbreviation of these four words, Nitzutze Shel Yankiv Avinu. This is a spark of Yankiv Avinu. So we see the connection between Yankiv and all Nisiim. Befrat from the Alter Rebbe, especially the Alter Rebbe, is his level of Messias. But they daven, and for every Jew, and each cooking the roof is katenti, even though it's katenti, which is the katnus. So makuyim werden the aftoche, still the promise of David should be fulfilled. I'll do good with you, and I will make your children like the sand of the sea that you cannot count because it's so much. And this happens every year. So whatever we explain here that Yaakov only davened because of the Kotenti, and then the Eibishter helped him. Same thing by everyone. They daven, then they see him daven, and becomes Mekuyim Davtocha that the Eibishter helps.